Absolutely.
Okay, let's get started. We have Tamindi ma'am and Ramesh sir on call from the teachers, and then Namrata, it's a great pleasure to have you here. Um, as you all know, she is an Inventure alumni, and she did her bachelor's in physics from University of California, Berkeley. And she's doing her master's of science by research with material science in University of Oxford now, and she's a Rhodes Scholar. So it takes great proud to have you here with us, Namu. And she is passionate about improving diversity in the STEM field. Namu will be speaking to us about the US college applications today. We have lots of grade 11 students who are thinking to apply to the US next year. And we also have some students from grade 10 and 9 and 11 who are interested in physics who would like to hear from you today. So over to you, Namu.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to meet you. And I hope you're all doing well. I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the main broad categories of questions that was sent over to me, and open the floor to just Q&A. So I'll keep this short so you have more time to just ask me questions. So my journey in physics is I started interest in astrophysics in high school, and I went into Berkeley because I also had interests in literature and like filmmaking and like so many other interests. So I really liked the US system in that you could do different things and potentially change your major. So I spent the first 2 years undeclared. And then finally, I was like, yeah, I guess I really do like physics, and I declared physics. And then I did undergrad research at a physical chemistry lab where I did a lot of work resolving stuff at the nanoscale level. So I can go more into that if you're interested, but that was more my undergrad research. And then took a leap of faith and applied for Oxford and the Rhodes Scholarship. Still a bit shocked that that panned out. And I'm at Oxford now, and I study lithium-ion batteries using computational techniques. So I'm not exactly doing, I do more applied physics work now. And that's also, if you want to know more about what that means, of course, happy to chat offline or like more, if you have a question. And so that's mainly about me and my journey in physics, and how I shortlisted colleges and planned it. I don't think I'm the greatest example because mine was a bit last minute. But I will say this. For me, what was really helpful is to decouple prestige of the name with what was actually in it for me, right? For example, I knew a lot of people were applying to all the Ivy Leagues, right? And I'm like, well, why? Because it's not necessarily going to be a great fit for you as a person, right? Where is the college, right? Location wise, the weather will affect you. So like ask yourself that question. You're spending 4 years of your life somewhere, right? So you really want to ask yourself, do I want to be there for 4 years? Do I see myself there? Ask yourself, how big is the college? Like, is it a small liberal arts school or is it a massive ocean like Berkeley was? And like, there are pros and cons to both, but what is it that would help you grow as a person, right? And of course, what's the strength of your department? What's the strength of like if you want to go into research, are there like good faculty members that you could do research with, right? Or if you like, what are the opportunities available at each university, right? And so like basically ask yourself these deeper questions and derive from first principles what those colleges are, right? Like ask yourself, what do you want from your college experience? And then find the colleges that fit that, right? And so how would you, like, I didn't really know anyone at these colleges, so I really had to Google around. I didn't really do like explicit college counseling, like from like an external source. I kind of just mucked around and figured it out. So like Google is a very powerful resource, but especially now that you have access to alumni like us, like I know lots of us now are in like pretty big universities, so you can very easily leverage that. And I highly recommend that you get that contact information from Inventure and like email people at the colleges you're interested at, right? So if any of you want to go to Berkeley, for example, please email me. Please ask me about it. Like, tell me how it was like. Like you have the added benefit now of having alumni who are at these top places, right? When I was at Inventure like a few years ago, that was still happening, like that was still not fully there, but now we have a really strong alumni base. And I can tell you a lot about Oxford as well if you're interested in the UK side of things. So yeah, please leverage the alumni to shortlist your colleges. On the question of profile building or preparing for applications, I would say start on your essays soon. It takes some time to work on your essays. And I would say, like, there's your common app essay. At least when I did it, there was your common app essay. And then there's like separate essays that you have to write for each college, right? And so I would say come up with that common app essay and then like some people would keep recycling like one essay for different colleges. Like I'm a bit of a perfectionist that way, where I would literally like ask my like tailor each essay to each college, right? So it was like the college essay is a very strange genre because you're literally pitching to the college why you deserve to be there, right? And you're saying I am more than just my grades and my CV and my letter of rec, right? Like this is who I am as a human being, right? And if someone read it, like one of your friends read it or your family read it, they're like, yeah, this is you, right? This makes sense. I see the human behind the results. What is that ground motivating thing that's inspiring you to apply to this college, right? And not just to a major, but that college specifically, right? Like why this college specifically? So I would say start as soon as you can on your letters. And I want to stress you don't have to know, especially for the US, exactly what you want to do. But you should sort of give some broad themes of what you hope to be doing, right? Just so that they get a sense of um, who you are and what you could be doing in their university. And you also want to show them that you will add value as a part of their student body, right? It's not just let me in. You're saying, look at what I can do for you as a student, given my experience, given my what I bring to the table. And that's essentially what that essay is. So I would say start that as soon as possible. I'm not sure how the SAT and ACT rules have changed this time. I know a lot of colleges are letting that go, which is good because I don't think it's the greatest metric. But if that is a metric that still exists for your colleges, also starting to prep on that would be good. I took the SAT like 2 times before I got the result I really wanted. So don't get too discouraged if you don't get your first like the result you want the first time round. Like these are not great indicators of your intelligence. It's just like a box that you have to tick, right, and move on. I think it matters, but especially I think for y'all, it doesn't matter as much as your letters of recommendation and all these other things. And finally, like pick really good letter writers, right? It's not just like these should be teachers that you know really well and who like can speak to you as a person. If the statement is talking about like what you think you are as a person, the letters of recommendation are like other people's perspective on who you are as a human. So really pick the teachers who you have built that rapport with and who you can trust to really speak to you as a person and not just as someone who does well in the class, right? So I think that's important. So I would say start on essays, map out your whatever testing you have to do, and start thinking about who are your letter writers and really follow up with them and make sure they submit on time and stuff like that, right? So I think those are probably 3 good steps as you like start to shortlist your colleges and things like that. Oh, I guess I also implicitly answered the question on college essays. Cool. So I guess these are the broad categories of questions that I have in mind as answering. And I'm now open to like answering any questions you have. How do we go about this? Should I answer chat and then like ask people if they raise their hand?
Both, Namu, let's go with Vriti first. Vriti has raised her hand, right? So
Okay.
Thank you. I wanted to ask specifically how the process works because I know for a fact that schools in the USA are really expensive. and the websites are really weirdly inaccessible, and I can't read what they're saying half the time, right? So
Mhm.
is it like I'm always very scared that I'll get some key information incorrect because I didn't know what it meant, right?
Mhm.
Especially applying internationally, because it's one thing to interact and it's one thing to apply in India, right, where you live. And it's another entirely to go across the planet and then realize you got something wrong.
Mhm.
Is this something that's there? So if you have any, like, if or was it like that for you, or what was the process exactly like? I guess, especially moving abroad.
So do you mean like compiling information about colleges or like um, moving abroad, like that process?
Applying and moving abroad and getting all your papers and things correct, because you can't
Yeah.
afford to have wrong information.
Well, I think it's good preparation for life because like in life too, there's like just a lot of implementation detail you just have to get used to, right? Like bureaucracy is going to be unfortunately a big part of adult life. So having said that, because I didn't go through an explicit college counseling process, I basically like was stewarding myself through that entire thing, right? And there are many ways you can organize this. Like I think for me, I like bookmarked a lot of things. I guess I had just a lot of notes on things. But like looking back, perhaps a better example of this is how I navigated moving to Oxford because I was a more competent adult at the time. So and like applying to like the Rhodes and like the Oxford materials thing here. So like these are things you can do now as well. I think having like a Google Doc or something or a Word doc or a spreadsheet where you're just keeping track of all the information you come across in different websites, like maybe even like coding it, right? Being like, this is what they want on like letters. These are their deadlines, right? And this is what it means to these are the sort of results that they want, right? Like start to see themes in what each college want and keep like flagging it. And the second is moving abroad, the college will actually give you a lot of guidance. Actually, most colleges will tell you these are the vaccinations you need to take. This is when you need to be there, right? So once you've actually gotten into the college, most of the times they will help you, they will guide you through that process, right? So you don't have to be too worried about all of that, and they will have a lot of like intranet pages on like lots of information on what you need to do. So I guess this is more like a question of how do you manage large swaths of information without getting overwhelmed, right? And I think the only possible way is perhaps like having a good bookmarking system on your browser, where you're really storing things away and making sure you can re-access web pages when you need them, having folder systems on your computer, and perhaps even having like a doc, a running doc, where whenever you see relevant information, you're just putting it in there, right? So these are just some small organizational tips. But also, you have more resources now at Inventure because A, a lot of us have gone through it, and B, the system is now more mature in how it handles these international sort of departures. So, like, you are in good hands.
If I may, Namu, when you went through this entire process, actually, we were still in the process of even making, a transcript that would be
Yeah.
recognized overseas. And, I was just helping out with counseling, doing it on my own. And we really didn't even have a department as such. But now you've got Samitra, you've got myself. We look at essays. We help you with college selection. We've got a software where you can do extensive research on colleges. And don't forget, we've had lots of people going to the US and to the UK and other places as well. So we can certainly help you with this process. It is not as cumbersome or as complex as it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think the system is more mature now, definitely, because many, like what, I graduated 2016, right? It's what, 2021 now? It's 5 years of institutional knowledge, and like many people have gotten into great universities from Inventure, right? So it's like now people are starting to understand and like have systems and processes to how to handle this. So like you're not alone, I guess, is my point. Yeah.
Namu, let's take Vedant's question before Neha's. When did you
Yeah.
start shortlisting colleges and how many did you shortlist?
Okay. So if I could have a time turner, I would have shortlisted a long time ago. Like, I mean, I would say 11th grade is a goodish time. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not the greatest example in my personal life because I've been extremely last minute about things. But I think saying like there is no like hard and fast rule I guess my point, right? Like when if you have made this decision to go to the US, start whenever you're ready to start, right? For me, I made the decision to go to the US pretty late, so I had to start like end of like beginning of 12th grade is when I did this process, right? But if you know like if you're in like 11th grade or something, right, you can start now. But having said that, I'd also want to recognize that like your interests are rapidly evolving at that age, right? So be open to flexibility. Like don't treat your list like a rule from God. I guess perhaps closer to when the deadlines are, it should sort of crystallize by that point. But perhaps start with a first draft of your list, right? Whenever you're sure of that you want to go to the US, and be open to like adding and removing things as you learn more about the process, as you learn more about what you want to do. So like I guess approach it with some nimbleness, and perhaps crystallize on it once the deadlines are like coming up, if that makes sense.
Neha, you raised your hand, right?
Yeah. So, what was the whole like Rhodes process like? Like, how did you decide that you wanted to apply for that particular scholarship, and what all did it like entail?
Oh, oh, what didn't it entail? Oh my God, it was Herculean. Oh God. Okay, so, well, I was in my final year of undergrad, and I had something. I had to go. I was like, I wanted to go to grad school, and I didn't want to pigeonhole myself to the US. I also wanted to see what's happening across the pond. And then I saw, okay, I can go to the UK. But the problem with the UK in postgrad is like in postgrad in the US, you get funding attached, right? Whereas in the UK, you have to get external funding to do anything, right? So I said, okay, what are the external funding sources? And Rhodes is one of them. I hadn't heard of it until I like literally looked it up a few weeks before the deadline. And I'm like, okay, maybe I should apply for this. And it's I think when you apply for something as selective as the Rhodes, you should always have a good backup plan because the selection rate is like so ridiculously small. Like it's not about how qualified you are after a certain point. It's just like who was lucky enough at a specific like at the final day, right? So I applied because not only was it an opportunity for me to go study at Oxford, it was also going to give me the community I needed to pursue my diversity initiatives more because the Rhodes Scholarship is a very activist oriented scholarship. And so the Indian constituency process was very rigorous. There's an application round, a written round, and then you get selected for a preliminary interview, and then you get selected for a final interview. And I think these days there's like a fourth interview that you have to do too. So it was like multiple layers of just proving yourself. And then I got it. And yeah, that was my process. It was a mess. It was very chaotic and stressful. Yeah.
Thank you. Mrinmay has raised her hand. Mrinmay, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so my question is if faculty and like subject departments were factors in you choosing your college, how did you really research them and decide that one was better than the other?
It's a great question. So there are multiple ways you can gauge this, right? So this is the complex thing. The department probably matters most if you are in an academic track, right? Like, actually, the department. Okay, I'll give you some examples. I wanted to do physics, and for me, it was quite clear I wanted to do research at even a pretty young age, right? Um, Even if I didn't, I want the option to have a strong physics department that I could do research in, right? But at the same time, since I was undecided, I also wanted to have like make sure whatever department I wanted to pivot to was good for my field, right? So there are ways you can gauge this. I mean, the rankings are like not the greatest, honestly. I mean, you could perhaps look at several rankings and then like be like, yeah, this place is good. But it's also a bit of common knowledge sometimes what places are really good for what, right? Like Berkeley has always had a very strong physics department, like historically very strong physics department. But they also have a strong English department. They have a strong econ department, right? So they're like multiple, like, but they have pros and cons, right? Um, and so you can typically look this up, and typically a college will be known for certain departments, right? But another thing to ask yourself too is what is their sort of way of teaching things too? Like how are things set up in the college, right? Like as a physics major, for example, I had to take several courses outside of my degree. But I really wanted to do that because for me, I wanted to go to an institute where I wasn't just studying physics. I could also do other things, and that was formalized in the curriculum. Whereas, say, if you do physics at an MIT or a Caltech, that's all you're doing. You don't get any other like opportunity explicitly to do physics. So, like, that's something you have to ask yourself too. It's not just the department, but what do you want out of your undergrad curriculum? Um, so, I don't know if that answered your question.
It did, it did.
Okay.
Thank you, Namu. We have a question in chat from Dia. How did you handle the transition from Inventure to Berkeley, since Inventure is a relatively small group of students compared to Berkeley?
Yeah, I think I actually really wanted to go to a big university after going to Berkeley. I mean, after going to Inventure, because I think there are lots of pros to being with a small group of people, but the cons also is that it's very, what should I say? I think it's much easier to like get complacent if you're like in a small group. Like there's a small group of people, it's much easier to be like, I'm the strongest at X, at Y, at Z. But when you go to a big university, you can't really say that anymore. Right? There are like hundreds of people who are easily equal to or better than you at many different things. Right? And that's a deeply humbling experience. Also, in a small place, it's much easier to perhaps find community, whereas in a big place, you have to be very active about making community. So there were challenges, of course, in navigating this. My first semester was quite difficult. But then I think I was quite determined to make friends, was quite determined to make it work for me and to see like the opportunity of actually becoming more like better at these things, like more humble in my mind first off, and just better at being active about making my community and making friends and just being more active in my social life. And those were like huge lessons that I still carry with me today. So difficult but transformative.
Thank you, Namu. Mihir has raised his hand. Mihir?
Hi, yeah. So you mentioned that you took the SAT twice. So do you have any recommendations on what the time to do this is and how, you should have a fallback for a second time trial for SAT if you didn't get the score the first time? So what are your recommendations on that?
I think for SAT, I did the first time mid 11th grade, and the second time like late, I don't fully remember, it's been that long, but I think like probably late 11th grade, early 12th grade. And I think it's very good practice to have like a fallback plan. Like just like it's fine. There's no shame in doing it more than once. Like it is fine. So yeah, try to do it mid 11th grade. Yeah, December, March, exactly. Yeah. Is there any other question?
Anyone wants to ask about physics, her experience, and what you do in UC Berkeley?
Oh, okay, sure. So physics, my experience in physics in Berkeley was interesting. I think in big research universities, this is something you should know. So in liberal arts colleges, you will definitely get people who really care about pedagogy and really care about teaching undergrads. That's a very important thing to understand, right? But in a big research university like Berkeley, that's probably not true because most people are picked for their research capacity and not for their teaching capacity. So a lot of my professors were not the greatest teachers. So that meant lectures were extremely boring, and I would mostly not go. But what I thought was the good part was it made me extremely self-reliant, and I feel like I basically taught myself the physics degree, me and like my friends, right? So that's another thing. What really matters is like the community of people that you're around, because these people will like really help you like solve problem sets together. Like it's a myth that physics is a lonely process. Physics is a very communal process. You are constantly solving things together. You're doing lab work together. It's a lab group, right? Not a lab person. Like even theorists are working in groups of people, right? So the lone genius thing is a myth. So I'd say a big thing is if you want to do physics, make sure you have a really good study group, a really good group of people you can do problem sets with. Like they will become your best friends in life, trust me, but also they will help you get through the degree, right? And my research work was on, so the lab I worked in was actually a physical chemistry group. And their sort of broad theme was to spatially and temporally, which means in space and time, resolve processes at the nanoscale level. So I'll give you an example. So I guess if you guys know what an electron microscope is, right? It's basically just like bombarding the sample with electrons and then seeing what happens on the other end, right? It can give you like structural information at the nanoscale. But also sometimes you can modify it such that you're not just seeing the escaped electrons from the sample as it bounces off, or you create new electrons. You can also see light emitted from it. And that can give you a new dimension of information, not just on the information of the structure, but also information of the chemical composition at a nanoscale level. And so I spent probably a year working with a grad student trying to understand her data. I ran like computational simulations to understand what was the source of certain light patterns at the nanoscale in some samples. So that kind of got me super into computational physics, which is what I do a lot more of now. So yeah, that's just an example of stuff I've done.
I have just have a
Thank,
question. What was the
yeah,
point
please
that
go
you
ahead.
gave about liberal arts college again? Like you just gave a point right now that they provide something more that the other colleges don't.
Yeah, so yeah, liberal arts colleges, people are literally picked there to teach, right? Like that, they're not exactly the strongest research spaces unless you want to do pure math. Then it's absolutely fine. Like you will meet amazing mathematicians who will be in liberal arts colleges because they don't need labs, right? But anytime your work requires a lab, um, and you want to do research, it makes sense to sacrifice perhaps the best teachers for great researchers as an undergrad, if that makes sense. So in liberal arts, you are guaranteed amazing teaching, like amazing teaching. But sometimes I've heard in some liberal arts colleges, people have actually got really one-on-one attention from their professors and gotten really meaningful research experiences too. Like that's something to consider as well. Even though you have really good researchers in big research institutes, it might be really hard to actually get to know your professor because they're like supervising hundreds of students sometimes, right? And especially as an undergrad, you're at the bottom of the ladder. Most professors will not care about you in big research universities. But in liberal arts, if you pick the type of liberal arts where they are also doing like science research, for example, you could also potentially get really intimate look into science because they will actually invest time into you as an undergrad. Yeah.
Hi, Namrata. Your recent publications in journal, were you able to publish any of your lab work or research?
I'm a second author on one of the works that's come out of my undergrad. And I did my undergrad thesis, which is not exactly published in a journal, but it's like published for the world. Yeah, and I'm currently working on something that could lead to a paper. So we'll see.
Very good. Keep it up.
Thanks. Yeah.
Nama, we have a question in the chat from Danya. In school, what were the different types of extracurricular activities you did before you applied to the undergrad?
Okay, so this is what I actually really like about Inventure, which is like literally always been true. And I think it's probably stronger for y'all now. Like Inventure is probably one of the few Indian schools where you actually like have extracurriculars like into your curriculum, right? Like you have your pods, you have like a strong MUN tradition, you have like your student council, you have beyond academics, you have community service. Like it's like an explicit part of your life. And my biggest advice would be for you to take it seriously, like actually leverage it, actually use it. Because I actually knew a lot of people who were like, I don't want to do SUPW, like that's so boring, blah, blah, blah. But like, honestly, like, first off, it was very meaningful for me to do as a human. And second off, it's actually very good for you for your career if you actually like sink into that experience and make that meaningful for you, right? So in Inventure, I did a lot of model United Nations. I was a BA captain. Um, what else did I do? I did outside of Inventure, piano, Bharatanatyam. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, I mean, those were my main things in Inventure. I did advanced math as well. I don't know if that counts as an extracurricular, but I do think if you have an option to do further math as a physics major, really should. I think further math really helped me, and it helped me place out of a lot of uh, preliminary courses in Berkeley. So it gave me time to do other things. Yeah, Pragya?
What was the process choosing between your lit major and the physics major? How did you decide that you'd go for physics instead of lit?
So I took courses. I did a course in, so we were required to do these like writing courses in undergrad. Like they were required. And I picked a very hard one for my requirement and learned a lot about literary analysis. And as much as it was compelling and exciting, it wasn't for me, which I don't know if you know, my mother is an English sort of guru. And so that was, I guess, yeah, I had to sort of part ways in that way. But I think, yeah, the very important thing is to actually go do a course in the thing that you want to do. And that will give you a very realistic understanding of what the work involves, right? Like a lot of literature is literary analysis. Like it's not the same as I like reading books, therefore I would like literature, right? No, there's like quite a lot that goes into actually doing the work of literature. So yeah, I recommend just taking courses.
Thank you.
Nama, we have a question in chat from Dia. Did you take any AP courses during your high school?
Nope. A levels are more than enough. Way more than enough. No need for APs. Do not add extra stress to your life in that way. Yeah. I know people who did, and I'm like, don't do that to yourself. Okay, I guess there's a question on how and when did you choose to pursue physics in college? I guess it's sort of similar to me eliminating literature, but I think to actually pick physics, I took a sort of advanced physics track in college, and while it killed me, it also made me really happy. So I said, okay, I guess it's difficult, but I still really like this. So that was one choice. And then the second, of course, is doing my research experience. At this point, I'd actually already chosen physics, but then this was my decision to stay in physics. And actually picking the right research group and really enjoying that process, really enjoying research is the reason why I still like stayed. So yeah, I'd say, do you enjoy your classes? And do you enjoy research work? Right. And I think those two questions will help you decide, is physics for me and is physics research for me?
Thank you, Namu. Would you like to speak about what you're doing currently in your field, or someone who's interested in physics in the call? What is the kind of long-term goal they are looking for in the field? Something related to physics. Would you like to explain something about that?
Sure. Okay. So currently I work on studying lithium ion batteries using computational techniques. So, okay, so I'll give you a bird's eye picture of where I think there are like interesting, exciting things happening in physics and how you can use your physics degree if you want to go down that path. So, of course, in physics, there are two types of ways you can go about things, right? There's experimental and there's theoretical. And there's not always as big of a like gap between them as we imagine. Like I actually am quite in the middle. Like I do a lot of like theoretical work, but I'm deeply conversant in experimental data, right? So like I'm very much at the interface of both. But you could go extreme theory, and over there the big questions are um, there's quantum mechanics, which explains the very small, and there's general relativity, which explains the cosmological scale, right? But they don't actually together. There's a gap. Like they're not exactly saying the same thing about the world, and the reason why is the general relativity description of gravity is not the same, and like it doesn't compute with what quantum would say, and there is no quantum description of gravity, right? But experimentally quantum is more true than general relativity, right? So it's like there is a massive hole in the big theories that we have about the world. And so if you want to go more into theory, first off you have to ask yourself, do you like pure math? So in college, if you can take a few pure math courses, try doing that. um, because a lot of that sort of theory work involves very like high level proof based thinking. Like you might have to think a lot about like you're more a mathematician at that point, right? Like thinking in a physics context. So like that would be what very like theoretical physics is, and a lot of that work is trying to bridge this hole between general relativity and quantum mechanics, which is where like string theory comes in. Like that's one proposal. There's lots of other like ideas, right? So that is an active area of inquiry. So that's one realm. The other realm is more experimental, and over there, you can ask questions about how do I build a quantum computer, right? Like, and that it could be a very experimental question. It could also be a mathematical question too, because you could go into algorithms and stuff like that. But experimentally, that is probably the most applicable thing you could be working on, because it actually involves like working with like lasers, working with electrons, working with photons, and you have to work with very, very sensitive systems. So it's heavily experimental, but also probably the best way you can make a living in the industry as an experimentalist. What I work on, lithium ion batteries, is also a good way to use your physics degree, because lithium ion batteries are still very bad. Like they do a lot of things, but there's still a lot of scope for improvement. So you can ask this at a very fundamental physics level, which is, or you could ask this question at a chemistry level. There's like a lot of questions to ask, which is like, what is the best sort of ensemble system we can create? What are the best materials for the positive electrode, the negative electrode, the electrolyte? You could even ask this from an engineering perspective. How, okay, say we have a unit, how do we like arrange them to get the best sort of capacity? So there's lots of scope in lithium ion batteries, lots of questions to answer there. Those are the three that come to mind. I mean, there's so many other, this particle physics I feel is going through a big problem right now, because experimentally, even though they're increasing the sensitivity of the collider, they're still not finding a lot of the theoretically predicted particles. So I think particle physics went through a renaissance in the 80s, but now I think it's going to be a bit difficult field to enter into. So that's something to keep in mind. In gravitational wave, astrophysics is picking up. So it's a completely new field that got the Nobel Prize actually a few years ago. So that's very interesting if you want to go down that path. There's like the entire realm of medical physics, which is all about like using MRIs and NMR and trying to better resolve, like improve those tools to better resolve things for like in brains and tissues. Yeah, lots of interesting things happening. Lots of interesting things happening. So yeah, I mean, I'm just scratching the surface. As you enter, I also recommend in college, if you, as much as you can, try to go to talks, go to colloquia, go to seminars, even if it's out of your depth. I mean, it's probably still out of my depth, honestly. It's still nice to just kind of expose yourself to what's happening.
Thank you, Namu. Any other questions for Namu? Make use of this opportunity. Vedant, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question on the extracurricular part. Did you do any projects based on your major before applying for undergrad?
No. And I think it actually, I think this question really matters on the colleges you're applying to. I think if you are applying to a very tech-based school like Caltech or MIT, I do think it will matter if you are able to show already that you have some experience here. But if you're applying to a more like broad school and you're applying more as undeclared, like it doesn't matter as much. So I barely had any experience with physics, like formally, when I applied. And it doesn't really matter because Berkeley physics is as prestigious as MIT physics, right? Like, so I got the same, for all purposes, probably the same level of rigor as someone who went to MIT, but probably just got exposed to more like things in terms of my coursework. So,
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
About your
Ramesh
material
sir,
science.
Damayanti ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, material science. You discuss something more
about material science. Yeah, material science is a very interesting umbrella term. It's it basically is any type of science that's applied to understand material systems, right? So you be a computational scientist working on refining ML algorithms that would help you better understand a particular material, right? But that would also make you a material scientist, right? You could be a chemist, and you have your training in synthetic chemistry, but because you are like working on this specific realm, you could also be categorized as a material scientist, right? So it's a pretty big, broad term for different scientists working together on a material system, if that on different material systems. So lithium-ion battery materials are very big in Oxford. Actually, Oxford was where we even discovered lithium-ion batteries. So that's why traditionally this department is very strong in that. Also, you could also look at superconducting materials. That's a big one as well. If you can find a room temperature superconductor, that will completely change how we transmit energy and electricity. And that could be very cool. Yeah, very magnetic materials, what that could mean. So yeah, big umbrella term. Perhaps if a small question, which grade do school grades really matter? From my perspective, I think colleges care more about trends, trends in improvement. And I think they typically asked like from 9th grade to 12th grade. And personally, I think if you have strong grades, 11th grade, you should be fine. Like, don't be worried about your 10th grade. Like, I wish I told this to myself in 10th grade because I was so stressed. I'm like, don't, it's okay. Like, it's all about showing a trend of improvement. And yeah, if you have strong grades in your 11th grade, that's great. Or you have strong predicted grades, that's great. Yeah. I actually had a quick aside to give. It just occurred to me. I think one thing that we don't talk about enough in this process is mental health, right? And my mental health was very poor when I was applying to college. So I think this is very important now that I'm older and saner and have been through my fair share of rejection, that I tell you from the other side that it's going to be okay. I actually got rejected from my first 4, 5 colleges until I got an acceptance, right? So don't take the rejection personally. It's very important. Um, and like just it is no reflection on your worth as a person, right? I actually remember my first choice was Stanford, right? And I didn't get it. And it crushed me. It's like shit. What do I sorry what do I do now? But then I got into Berkeley, like after 4, 5 rejections back to back to back. It was brutal. And then I was really happy. I said, okay, I'll make this work, right? And Berkeley was great for me. And interestingly, the girl that got into Stanford from India that year and I actually met, because typically they only pick one person from India to Stanford, right? And her and I met at some conference somewhere, and it was like we were both equals. So it's sort of like evened out at the end, right? And she actually came to me for advice on applying for the Rhodes Scholarship. So like it all like evens out in life, right? So I think more important than these things, I really want you to look inside of you and ask yourself, how do I take care of my mental health, and how do I let this not define me as a person? Because undergrad is important, but it's only the beginning of your life. And like you don't have to get into the most prestigious university to be successful, right? Like you can be fine. Like, my dad didn't go to the most prestigious undergrad, right? But he's extremely successful at what he does. So, like, he would keep telling me, Namu, it's okay. Namu, it's okay. Look at me, look at me. And it just didn't click in my head. But yeah, I think it's very important to realize this. So please take care of yourselves as you go through this process. Nothing is worth earth-shattering stress. If you don't get a grade you don't like your city score, fine, it's okay. Try again, right? You don't get into the college you want, okay, start again from the drawing board. It doesn't mean anything about you. So, you know, you're human first. Don't forget that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Namo. That's a great piece of advice. Ramesh sir, would you like to add something?
No, I think the last piece of advice you gave is actually perhaps the most useful, and I think we put a lot of stress. Kids put a lot of stress on themselves these days, and I always say you're meant to go where you end up going, and it will always turn out positive. In fact, our job is to make it positive. So that's the learning there, I think. But no, great. Thanks, Namu. It's been wonderful listening to you and seeing you again. And I think everyone's enjoyed it. I think your mail's been given, right? Email ID has been given. So
Yes.
I would encourage all of you to be in touch with Namu for any further questions. I see there's another question there. So I've just come up.
How did you start studying computational physics? Was it similar to a course you had taken or something else? For me, it was more like during my research, whenever I did computational simulations, that made me the most happy. And whenever I was actually doing experiments that made me unhappy. And I remember also in lab work, what always made me excited was actually doing the back end coding rather than like doing the actual circuitry work, for example. So I think it just kind of emerges from your own sort of research experience and what you gravitate to in classwork. I also took a few computer science courses. I wasn't exactly good at it, but it like kind of got me really interested and excited, and like I guess I've gotten better since. So yeah.
Thank you, Namu. I have entered her email ID in the chat box. In case anyone want to get in touch with her, anyone who is looking at UC Berkeley next year or Oxford next year, reach out to her. And thank you so much for taking time in your busy schedule, Namu. It's a pleasure having you here.
Of course. Good luck. Know that you're all going to be fine. All going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I know this is stressful, but you will be fine. Okay? And please email me if you have any questions.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Yes.
you. Bye.
Okay. It was good. Nice. The
Bye,
last
Tamindi ma'am.
one.
Yeah. But
That's nice.
yeah, it was good. Maybe students could have been more active. Maybe I don't think physics interested students.
Yeah, some of them were there. I could see Vedant and Mudit, and some of them were there.